I've seen some really common trends between the content that does really well and the content that doesn't. And today, to help illustrate that, I am picking through some of the content on our websites, some of the content that's done really well, and some of the content that really doesn't do well. And I want to show you specific actionable things that you can do in the content you write to help ensure, or at least give the best chance of great success. Here at Income School, we own a lot of websites. Several of them are sites that we start ourselves from scratch, from zero. We do the search analysis, and then a mix between us and our own writers, we write all the content for all of these websites. Some of these are websites that we purchased and that we're working to improve so that we can sell them for a profit. So today, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna look at some specific websites. One of them is a site we started from scratch, and the other two are websites that we bought a while back and that we've been working to revamp over time. And we're gonna be looking at some really high performing articles. We'll also look at some of the articles that really didn't do very well so that you can see what's different. The very first one here is on our website, Suggested by Locals. This is a website we started from scratch. It's one we like to use as a training ground for our writers. We hire writers who are college students, but who come from all over the place. So what do? We teach them how to write good blog posts, and then we invite them to write some articles about wherever they come from. So we have a lot of articles about specific cities and specific states all over the United States, written by people who actually are from there. There are hundreds of blog posts now on this website, and we've seen some that have done extremely well. The first one here is this article, Moving to Oregon versus Washington, 17 pros and cons. Basically, which one should I go live in? This article performs really well. It gets a bunch of traffic, and the question is, why? There are a few specific things from this article that I want to point out. You see, because as we look at it, it just looks like a big list. It doesn't look that special. We have pros and cons of Washington and pros and cons of Oregon. That's the whole thing, with a little bit of a conclusion here at the end. So why does it get so much traffic? Is it just because the search volume is really high for moving to Washington versus Oregon? That's really not the only reason. It might be a part of one of the reasons, but it's definitively not the primary reason. First of all, is these lists of pros and cons are actually really good. So pros of moving to Washington, there's lots of parks. If I'm personally considering moving to a specific location, there are gonna be reasons why I may or may not wanna live there. And some of those might be, how much open park space do they have? I like the outdoors. Maybe I want lots of hiking trails. Maybe I have kids. I want good schools. So these lists are not only good lists, but the items in the lists are very, very relevant to the search intent of the person who's doing the search. If instead I filled the list with really generic information or just kind of interesting facts that make one state interesting versus another, that wouldn't be nearly as helpful. So even though this particular blog post didn't go above and beyond in doing a ton of like independent research and some of those things that we teach, right? And putting together awesome data tables or this or that, they didn't even include much in terms of images other than like the flags of the states, right? But what did they do? They wrote highly relevant content for what the search is. But there's one more thing that's really big on this one, and it's something we can see if we look in Google Search Console. You'll notice that a lot of the specific searches that get the clicks are things like Oregon versus Washington living in Oregon versus Washington, all related to the primary search query that this article was written for. And that's great. But you'll notice that I'm also getting traffic and I'm getting a lot of impressions from things like cost of living, Oregon versus Washington, which along those same lines is Oregon cheaper than Washington. How about this? Is Oregon a good place to live? That has nothing to do with the comparison between Oregon and Washington, but I'm ranking for it and I'm getting some traffic. I'm also getting traffic for searches like Portland, Oregon weather and best places to live in the Pacific Northwest. That's because the format of this kind of article, being a big list post, it allows us to cover a lot of different aspects of living in Washington and living in Oregon, and we can potentially rank for a lot of different search queries that we answer within the blog post, even though it's not the primary query that we wrote it for. Now, could we get even more traffic on this blog post? Very easily, because we could go through here and we could identify some of these other search queries that we're showing up for where our click-through rate is particularly low. So check this out. I sort by click-through rate and I identify some of these like this one, Oregon and Washington. Maybe that will be tough to rank for because I don't even know what they're asking for. But here, how about cheapest place to live in Oregon? What if I just answered that question briefly in one of my pros for living in Oregon. It would require a little bit of research, but hey, there's 225 more people that might have clicked on my article if I had a good answer to that question. So even for these high-performing blog posts, there's a lot we can do to drive the traffic. But really, this one's already doing pretty awesome. On this same website, here's an article that is not doing so well. 9 famous celebrities who live in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, the problem with this one isn't the article itself. It's not that it's a poorly written article, and it's not even that it doesn't rank. You might say, maybe that's competitive, maybe it doesn't rank well. Let's go ahead and do the Google search here. Okay, so it's not a ranking issue. I'm right here, right? There's this Google knowledge graph. There's a blog post, there's the people also ask, and then we're right here, right? But for some reason, this article is one of the lowest performing articles on this entire website. So why might that be? Again, it's not that it's not on the first page of Google. The issue I believe here is, one, it's hard to make this article stand out based on the headline above these other ones. I think we could potentially work on improving it. Maybe we add a year to it. We say, 9 famous celebrities who live in Las Vegas, Nevada in 2022, and we make sure we keep the list up to date. But the bigger issue is the knowledge graph data. Here, Google has access to information about lots of famous people and ones that particularly live in Las Vegas. And because of that, Google can give us a pretty complete answer to this question right here in the search results without referencing any blog posts. Now, this knowledge card that we have here doesn't show up in a lot of the different iterations of this search query. If I just change the wording a little bit, it may or may not show up. So I think another part of the issue is my article is not that different from the rest of these. And this one up here has 19 celebrities. And so it just doesn't stand out very well. And the click-through rate on this article is abysmally low. Our next site here is fishtanksetups.com. This is one that we bought. Almost none of the content was written by us, although some of the most recent content we did write. We have simply gone through and updated some of the images and things and made some improvements to some articles. We still have a lot more work to do on this. The design is one that I actually talked about in a different video, so we'll hit on that another day. This article here, it actually does really, really well and gets a lot of traffic. And the search query, or really the title of the article, is "What Fish Can Live with Turtles?" That is the primary search query, right? So why does this article do well? Well, one of the reasons, and really the main reason, is if we scroll down a ways, which I don't love that we have to scroll down so far, we find the answer to the question very thoroughly answered, although it's a little bit hidden. I wish that it was much better, and so we're actually gonna need to go back and dramatically improve this article, because I actually think it can do a lot better. But here, the determining factors for housing fish and turtles, the species of the fish, and here we get a list of the fish that do well with turtles that you can actually put in the same aquarium. And here we have a list of turtles that can do well with fish. That answers the primary search query here, right? What fish can live with turtles? But the article does a couple of other things too. It tells us why turtles and fish often don't go very well together. Also, if I scroll further down, it answers some questions about how we can increase the chances that your fish is going to survive in a tank that has a turtle, as well as various other pieces of advice around fish and turtles in the same aquarium. So really, this article has the potential to rank for a lot of different things. Again, not just that primary search query that the headline is based off of. In fact, I'd say of all things, that's probably one of the lower focuses of this entire article. And again, when we go to Google Search Console, we see how this plays out. Look at this. The click-through rate for most of these search queries that it's ranking for isn't really that high. Now here, best fish to keep with turtles, we do pretty well, right? But a lot of these, the impressions are high and the clicks are pretty low. And actually, it only gets worse as we go down. I mean, if we sort this by impressions, you'll see a lot of these here where the click-through rate is like well under 1%, somewhere it's right around 1%. And because of that, there are just a ton of impressions on this article because it answers so many different questions. But because it doesn't do as good a job of answering any particular one, and it doesn't focus on one aspect of fish and turtles, it doesn't get a click-through rate that's very high for any particular one. So why does this one do so well? Because it can rank for so many things. It's really that simple. But the reason it can rank for so many things is because it actually does a good job of answering a lot of different questions. It's just not structured in a way that makes it really easy for it to perform well in Google search. for any of those particular search queries. And by not well, I mean it's not ranking number one. It's showing up on page 1 of Google for numerous different search queries. But now let's look at one on this website that doesn't perform very well. This one here is best glass cleaner. What's the best aquarium glass cleaner? This one does really poorly. Let's go ahead and do that Google search as well. All right, so I searched best aquarium glass cleaner, and there we are, we're only number 3. So why is it that it does so poorly? Well, let's look at the first ones. 5 best algae scrapers, tested and compared. There are actually a few different types of cleaners that you can use to clean the inside glass of your aquarium. But when I first heard this headline, best aquarium glass cleaner, I was thinking, are you talking about a non-ammonia glass cleaner for the outside of the glass, like that I can spray on it and clean it? Because by the way, Windex and most glass cleaners have ammonia in them, and that will kill your fish. So if any of it gets up in the water, we just don't use that kind of glass cleaner on a fish tank. But that's what I was thinking it was about, was to clean the outside of the glass. But no, they were talking about the scrapers or the brushes you use inside. Many of them are magnetic. And so from the outside, you can move this brush along and clean the algae off the glass. It's pretty cool. The next one, the best aquarium magnet cleaner for 2022, Aquatic Eden. Again, both of these, it's really clear what they're talking about. Here, I don't really know what kind of glass cleaner you're talking about. And in fact, when we go look at the blog post, we see that it's gonna talk about what to look for in a good glass cleaner. Okay. It's gonna talk about the 5 best fish tank glass cleaners. And then it also tells us about like all these different types of glass cleaners, all within the same article. Should we use scrapers or not use scrapers? There's a ton of helpful information in here from someone who clearly knows what they're talking about. But again, there's so much information packed into one blog post, and it doesn't have a structure that's easy to follow. If the article is the 5 best glass cleaners, we should probably focus on one type of glass cleaner. Here, he talks about magnetic ones, but he talks about one that's a handle scraper that you go in from the top, right? He talks about ones with scrapers and ones with brushes. Let's pick one and let's talk about it. Maybe we should have a separate blog post that talks about the best type of glass cleaner to get algae off the inside of your fish tank. That's a really long headline, but we could find a better one that conveys that same point. And then within an article like that, we would, for each different type, we would link out to some recommendations of the best one. By not being focused enough, this blog post doesn't do very well. Honestly, we could probably improve it dramatically just by improving the headline to make it clearer what we're talking about. Again, the click-through rate is really low, I think in large part because these articles, it's really clear what they're talking about, and they mention the year, so we know it's up to date. But this one, it's just hard to know what kind of glass cleaner they even mean. All right, let's move on to another website. This is another one that we bought, and this is one of the articles that was written on it before we added content to it. So this article happens to be doing really, really well, and there are a few reasons why, and I hope that you've stuck around because I think this is one of the things that could open up your mind a little bit to a different way of thinking about doing your search analysis. This article is about a specific series of garbage disposals. The whole website is about mostly garbage disposals, but now also trash and recycling. And this is a particular series, the Badger 5, 500, and 5XP made by InSinkErator. Why does this do so well? Well, InSinkErator is an extremely popular brand of garbage disposal. They make a lot of the garbage disposals that are sold in regular hardware stores and that are used by contractors when they install them in your house. Here we talk about what's the difference between the 5 and the 500, as well as between the 5 and the 5XP. It answers that question so thoroughly that if somebody's asking any version of this question, it ranks really well. But there's something that takes this a step further. Not only is the brand InSinkErator really popular, but this particular model, the Badger, is one of the most sold versions of this garbage disposal because it's basically the least expensive. If you go to the Home Depot and you walk back to the garbage disposals and you find the cheap one on the wall, it's this one. What percentage of people are gonna buy the least expensive one versus the ones who are gonna spend more on one that maybe runs a little bit quieter, but costs substantially more and tends to be a lot bigger because they have to have a lot of insulation space to keep the sound down. I'll give you a hint. Most people, a high percentage of people, are gonna buy the less expensive one. And they're gonna search for the less expensive one. But when they see the 5 and the 5XP and the 500, they're gonna wonder, what are these different numbers? Are they all the same? They pretty much look the same. So how are they different? I can just see people doing this because I do the same thing all the time. I'm sitting there at the store and I pull out my phone and I type out like, what's the difference between these different products? And the cool thing is this article answers them very thoroughly. And it's able to do it in not that many words, which is also pretty cool. It makes it really easy for you to figure out the answer to the question. Basically, we find out that the 5 and the 500 are not different. They're the exact same, but the 500 is the model number given to the Home Depot. And the 5XP is basically the same one. It's just a little bit bigger motor. The principle here, though, is really valuable. When we're looking in our niche and considering all the different topics that we could write articles about, when we can find those topics that are more likely to be searched by a high percentage of the people that are interested in the niche, we can find the topics that are gonna have the most search volume. As someone who is maybe buying or renting a home, maybe for the first time, but maybe for the course of your entire life, you're never gonna become an expert on garbage disposals. So you're gonna do searches around the basics of garbage disposals. And when you're searching for a product comparison, you're more likely to compare the really, really popular and really inexpensive version versus that little niche luxury version that's bought by less than 1% of consumers. So keep that in mind. If we want more search volume, we need to write content that's more likely to be searched for and therefore viewed by the broad audience, by the majority of people. And then if what we want to do is steer them toward a much better option that's not that much more expensive, cool, do it within that article. But first write the article that's going to attract the big groups. On the other end of the spectrum, on the same website, we have this article. It's a specific review of a specific model of a specific brand. Notice the problem here? We've already narrowed it down. Instead of a series of garbage disposals, we're talking about a specific one. But it seems like it should be pretty popular, right? It says right here in the article, Waste King is a popular brand of garbage disposal. InSinkErator and Waste King are both leaders in the industry, and it says that this is a fairly new model, at least at the time of writing. In fact, it's kind of on the lower end cost-wise as well, so it should be pretty popular. But it turns out this article gets a fraction, a tiny fraction, of the traffic that the other one gets. I want to show you something that we can use that can help us figure out just how big a potential audience is. It requires some comparison though, because we don't get specific and accurate numbers. This is Google Trends. In Google Trends, I can just search the different brands. Let's look up InSinkErator. And let's just see how popular searches with the word InSinkErator are compared to searches with Waste King. Two different brand names, and voila. We see this is over the past 12 months, over the last year. We see that they just don't even compare. Let's look at the last 5 years. Waste King gets a fraction of the search volume, less than a third, probably more like a fifth to a quarter of the search volume of InSinkErator. So are they both the leaders in the industry, or really is InSinkErator the leader by a long shot? That being the case, at least from a search perspective, it looks like InSinkErator is going to be the brand that's going to yield us the most traffic. So ideally, we would make sure that when we're writing articles comparing different garbage disposals, ideally we would make a comparison that includes a particular InSinkErator model. Now there's one other issue again with this topic. I'm going to grab this headline and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go into another browser where I'm not logged in, and I'm just going to search that exact headline. Look at that. DisposalXT.com ranks at the very top, just below Amazon. Like that's not bad, right? For a specific product and for a review of it, right? But look at that. Waste King 9910 versus the L111 versus Badger 1. The Badger 1 is another InSinkErator model. And then they gave me another opportunity, right? They gave me two listings right here. Best Waste King garbage disposals and their common features. This article also mentions the Waste King 9910. Notice what's conspicuously missing? The article that's the actual review. That's because too much of the information that was written in that article is also included in these other articles, but these other articles have been deemed more authoritative over time. So that article, even though it's right on point, I mean, it's word for word, the headline is what I searched, and yet it doesn't show up because of topic cannibalization. We've covered the topic in multiple places. We've covered that exact content, that exact information in multiple places on the website, making it so that that other article that reviews that exact garbage disposal is basically worthless. That kind of article is definitely a waste of your time. So don't waste your time writing articles you shouldn't write. Make sure that you know how to do good search analysis to come up with the right topics. That is key. It's probably just as important as how you write the article. But also, as we learned from fish tank setups, You can have a great topic that gets a lot of search volume, and you can end up not getting a lot of searches because you don't write very good headlines and because you don't structure your content in a way that the really good answers you have are easy to find and easy to recognize. So all of these are going to be important skills for you to develop if you want to be successful as a content creator for the web. So I want to invite you to go check out this playlist here. This is a playlist of videos that we have made on this channel, a whole bunch of them over the years, about how to write the best blog posts depending on the situation. Product reviews are going to be different than just really informative answers to a specific question. We're also going to teach you how to do good research for blog posts, how to write them quickly. So much awesome content right there in that playlist. So go check out the videos in that playlist, and hopefully we'll see you again here on this channel.